ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Zombie Train. This is episode number 311, and I am your host, Ellis, otherwise known as the Admiral. It took me a bit to find this comment, because it just happens to be that it's not, like, in chronological order. I had to go back several episodes and find it. It was back on episode 209, which, for contrast, the episode that the next comment is from is episode 246. So I had to go back. This is 2 years ago. Eastrail 11 asks, did you ever loot gas stations for fuel, and was anyone born on the zombie train or in the company? I also think I asked the question. I was talking about the question on that episode. I'm not sure if I've talked about looting gas stations for fuel before, but of course, if electricity had died fairly quickly and the place didn't get burned, which a lot of gas stations and other, maybe not gas stations specifically, but places that held flammable liquids tended to fall victim to arson or even just random fire during and shortly after the Great Panic. So, as far as looting gas stations for fuel, yes, but as I've mentioned before, gas goes bad, and, I mean, gas stations were the only real place to get it. Finding one that hadn't been damaged or destroyed was its own problem. Finding one that hadn't been damaged or destroyed, but had its power knocked out soon enough, and then was thereafter ignored, so that there was still gas there, was, difficult. And actually extracting the gas and then hoping that it hadn't gone bad, difficult, or at least rare. So that's that. Yes. The answer is yes, because that is how we got most of our gasoline before we started refining oil once again, a few years into the Zombie Train Incorporated. But it wasn't like we would go out of our way to get gasoline. Anyway, Children of the Train, I think, is the more interesting part of this question here, because there was one child born on the train during the Zombie Train era. Actually, there were two. There were two, because there was one that was a family member of mine's kid, my cousin, and there was one that was just a passenger's child, which we happened to be, I guess I call it a passenger, we happened to be in the right place, right time. There was a woman going into labor, and we had adequate nursing facilities, adequate sort of hospital facilities, so we brought the woman on board, because it was a cleaner and safer place than doing it in their house. But that, I wouldn't really call that a child of the train. We just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And this being America, we sent them a large hospital bill afterward. Kidding. That's not even like a contemporary politics joke, because that's so far gone before the war. But still funny, at least to the people who are around to remember it. We did have some younger folks on the train. Well, actually, let's talk about Jenny's kid for a second. His name was Michael, and that's just the first thing that pops into my head. And he's my cousin, and I don't see him very often now because they live out, like, Denver area, I think. But the kid was born on the train, I think it might have been like a year after Firefall, but no, because I don't remember having the kid on the pass, but now I'm not even sure if Jenny was there. God, it all blurs together, I swear to God. It was shortly before the Zombie Train Incorporated started. And I know it was shortly because unlike what I'm sure you're getting at, it's not like we had a baby to tend to for years that eventually grew and, like, the only thing they knew was the zombie train. The fact of the matter is the zombie train didn't last long enough for that really to happen. Maybe if we had lasted, like, 10 years before the Zombie Train Incorporated started, you could have had a kid if they happened to be born, like, right at the beginning. But that didn't happen. So, yeah, I mean, Michael knows that he was on the train when he was very young. Then, sort of like for his safety, he ended up living in California, which Paul stayed on with us, because we needed him far too much. But Marie and Jenny ended up getting off. Marie is my aunt, Jenny's mother, ended up getting off and staying around San Francisco. They were, I wouldn't say our contacts there, but it was like, okay, we know someone who lives there now. We did previously have relatives in the area, but they didn't make it. They didn't make it probably that far past the Great Panic. I don't know when it ended up happening to them. But, yeah, so we had a very short amount of time on the train, so we didn't have that. And then once the Zombie Train Incorporated started, we were really being less nomadic. We started forming a lot more bases and things like that, because we had a lot more manpower and a lot more supplies, resources for building and, of course, running locomotives. So it didn't make sense for somebody that was pregnant even, or nursing a child, raising a small child, I should say, really, to stay on the train. But there was... her name escapes me. There was the girl from Atlanta, which she was 9, I think, when we picked her up. I was friendly with a woman who was friendly with her father, or friendly with the girl's father. They worked together, they were part of a weather team, and the father ended up getting killed, and I don't know who the mother was. To my knowledge, she was dead before, either during or before the Great Panic. The girl didn't seem to know, and I don't know why her name escapes me. I've even, I started writing down everything that happened in and around Firefall. This happened slightly before, and so I've chronicled her time with us, at least to an extent, and I can't remember her name. This is how many years it's been. This is how long it's been, where I'm forgetting the people that I spent years of my time with, and I'm forgetting, like, the organization of people. This sucks. Getting old sucks. I'm not even that old, but, it's, but she was on the train with us for a few days, and then Firefall hit, and then that's when Weibel and I, it was the first time that we met up. We were in New Orleans. There was a hurricane called Firefall. At least that's what we named it. And we were helping evacuate people and getting these two ships. They were U.S. Navy cargo ships, I think. I'm not totally sure what they originally were. They weren't warships, I know that much. That they had mothballed there, getting them running, getting them out so they could evacuate the people before the storm hit. That didn't work. And so we ended up basically running. Everyone got on the boats. The boats got, like, thrown upstream, up the Mississippi River, and then beached way up there. One of them was able to be dislodged and then ended up sort of being very helpful to us later on because of the, it was some sort of cargo ship. and they could carry a lot of cargo. And of course the captain owed us one. Or several. But she ended up going with the woman. Wow, I don't have any names today. I remembered Michael. That's good. I remember Jenny and Marie. They were my relatives, so I kind of have to. But she ended up going with the woman. She's been chronicled in like everything before. She always pops into my head. And then maybe a year or so went by, and we ran into her again, and then she was on the train again for a little while. No, it couldn't have been a year. She was on the train during Firefall, then she was off the train, then she was back on the train for a spell, and then she was off the train before we started heading west. And then when we came back, she became like a permanent fixture on the train because apparently she really enjoyed her time there. And so, I mean, that's like the one person that really got to grow up while on the train. Although it wasn't really that long. You know, it was only 2 or 3 years between Firefall and Annex. Maybe not even that. Which Annex is when the Zombie Train Incorporated began, more or less. So that means she went from like 9 to 12, which is a really formative period, and I guess she learned a lot while being on the train, because of course she wasn't going to public school, because nobody was going to public school. We didn't exactly have a classroom prepared, and that was kind of part of the reason I wanted her to go and like live in one of these communities, but she, you know, certainly felt an attachment to me because of, well, I was there when her father died, and I rescued her from, well, I say like, I was the big damn hero. We, the zombie train, rescued her from the boxcar she was shut up in, which was a preventative measure to keep the hostile forces in Atlanta from getting to her, and I don't mean zombies. But my understanding is that she was not intended to be locked up there for very long, and she was in there for a few days, when we finally got to her. And, yeah, so, again, clearly she felt some sort of attachment to me, and maybe she felt like she owed the train once again. We seemed to be owed a lot of favors by a lot of people. That was always kind of a good thing throughout the life of the zombie train. But, I mean, she was fantastic to have along because, I mean, she was a young girl and she could fit into, like, small spots when we wanted to, like, you know, get somebody really up underneath the car to replace this gasket or something, and, you know, we're in a tight spot and nobody can really get under there, not even me. I'm not that big. But, I mean, she was very clever. I'm gonna say that much. Never, you know, and, like, fearless, almost. I don't know. She really had this way about her. Again, having her on the train was really kind of a delight, because she was always, like, a bright spot. And, I don't know, it always sort of brought me down, because I would think about her father, but she interacted really well with everyone on board. Everyone sort of loved her, and again, I think they taught her a lot, because she was able to be around, like, Marie and learn all this cooking stuff, and my mom and learn all this, you know, communication, wireless, and whatever, and then, like, know the engine front to back, and know, you know, all sorts of things about, I think Paul was teaching her about, like, you know, things, very practical things, you know, welding and forging and all of his metalwork. I mean, she spent time with, like, everyone there. She was just, like, a sponge of information, and she just wanted to, like, learn every job she could. But that was really the only kid we had on the train, and I wouldn't even really call her a kid. Train man out.